Well, we made it to the middle of the week here on the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com. Getting you ready for ACC Media Day. It started yesterday, really. They had a handful of teams, and the commissioner spoke, and it'll continue today. It'll continue tomorrow, but the key today is that it's Pitt's day. So Pat Narduzzi, Lyndon Cooper, who else? Desmond Reed, Kyle Lewis, Javon McIntyre. They'll be in Charlotte for ACC Media Kickoff, or ACC Football Kickoff, or as we like to call it, ACC Media Day. We all know what the event is and what it entails. But the Pitt players and coach, Pat Narduzzi, will be talking to the media today, answering questions. What should you expect out of it? And is the reality that the more interesting things came out yesterday, and really the more interesting things are being discussed at the media days for the SEC and the Big Ten, because they're ultimately the ones making all of the decisions. And how does it impact Pitt? What their decisions are and what they're looking at doing, what they want to do, how does it impact Pitt? Chances are Pat Narduzzi will get asked about that today. I think he might. I don't know if it matters what the coaches say about this. It's really up to the commissioners and the university leaders and conference leaders and whatnot. But I'm sure, if I was going to be there today, I would ask Pat Narduzzi about it, just out of curiosity to hear what he has to say. But I think there's interesting questions to discuss, particularly about scheduling, and what scheduling looks like in different playoff selection scenarios. If they go to the playoff selection scenario that the SEC and the Big Ten are talking about, is, with 4 automatic qualifiers and all, and only 4 automatic qualifiers from each of their conferences and 2 from the ACC and Big 12, and 1 or 2 others, from the rest of the group. If that's what they ultimately decide to do, what does that mean for Pitt? What does that look like for Pitt? What impact does that have for Pitt? So let's talk about the ACC's new rules, which they announced yesterday. Let's talk about what we might hear, or what we might want to hear from Pat Narduzzi and Pitt's players today, and kind of some other big picture questions about college football in 2025 as it relates to the ACC, as it relates to your Pitt Panthers, all right here on the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, it's Wednesday. We are really barreling toward the start of training camp here. I think Pitt starts training camp a week from today. So, we are coming up on it fast. Of course, when training camp, or when media day when training camp starts in the South Side, that's when the season truly is around the corner. And I feel like this has come up pretty quick. I think this offseason has sort of flown by. That game against Toledo feels like a long time ago, but I'm still sort of surprised that we're right here, basically on the precipice of training camp, which will then put us on the precipice of starting the season. But either way, we have no shortage of things to talk about here on the Morning Pitt every day of the week, which we do on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Monday through Friday, we have these Morning Pitt shows. We have our weekly live show. We'll be live tonight here at 8:30 on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We'll post-game shows, interviews, press conferences, all those things. So make sure you like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You won't miss any of our Pitt video content. Then check out the website, Panther-Lair.com. So ACC Media Days, what's newsworthy, what comes out of this? Sometimes you get mixed, it's a mixed bag of newsworthiness. Even if there are big topics like there are facing the ACC right now, you don't always get anything all that concrete. You'll get the commissioner. And this goes for all the conferences. This goes for the Big South Conference, or the Mountain West, or the Pac-12, the ACC, all these conferences. The commissioner will get up there and talk about how the conference is stronger than it's ever been. They're in the strongest position they've ever been in, and he couldn't be more excited about the future, which is so solidified. You can't even believe how solidified it is. It's so solidified they're going to take on concrete manufacturers as a title sponsor for the conference championship game. That's how solid everything is. They are in such great footing, and the conferences could very well fall apart the next day. But to hear it from, it's like any coach at their opening press conference, their media day press conference. They're so excited. They've had the best offseason ever, and all the players are in the best shape of the. This is what everybody puts forward. Presents themselves as coming from a position of strength, no matter whether anyone actually believes it or not. the least, not the least of which being the person speaking those words. And so, you heard that from Jim Phillips yesterday. That's what you hear at these conference media days. You hear the conference leadership and the coaches and the players all talk about how they're in such a great spot. Now, I mean, credit to Jim Phillips, the ACC commissioner. He was honest about the fact that, the ACC went like 2-11 in bowl games last year or something like that. He said we have to do better. We have to play better. We have to win more games. We have to do better in the non-conference and do better in the bowl games. But still, we are a great conference, one of the best in America. No worse than the top 6 conferences in America. He didn't say that part. I added that in. But I mean, really. But newsworthiness, there was a little bit of newsworthiness coming out of the ACC Media Kickoff, or ACC Football Kickoff. I'm sort of blending ACC Media Days and ACC Football Kickoff to make it ACC Media Kickoff. As far as I know, there was not a kicking competition, although the Triangle Media might take it upon itself and to hold a punting competition and assume that the rest of us care. But there was a little bit of newsworthiness to come out of the ACC Football Kickoff yesterday. There's 2 announcements of rule changes, sort of. One is basically saying you can't storm the court while the visitors are still on the court. You can't storm the field while the visitors are still on the field. That was an important that was one of the things that the ACC deemed as being important. And I think it's fun when students do that. It's fine. Obviously you don't want, like you probably should try to avoid having it happen when the players from the opposing team or the coaches from the opposing team are still on the field. You should probably get them out of there before you let it happen. But I'm sort of the mind that if you can prevent it to the extent that you can hold them back until the visitors leave the field, then you can probably just hold them back. Right? Like, you don't actually, I know I just said that it's fun. It's one of those unique sort of college sports things, but like, if you're going to police it to the point where you can decide when they're allowed to go on the field, then you can also just sort of close that gate, right? Like, you don't have to allow them on the field. The fun part about storming the field is that it's spontaneous. I can remember one of the few games I went to at Pitt Stadium was the 1997 game against Miami, and I just remember, and my friend and I weren't really that, I went with a friend, we weren't really that engaged with the state of the Pitt football program in 1997 when we were freshmen, but everybody else started running down to the bottom of the bleachers and jumping off the wall, and we thought, let's run down the bleachers and jump off the wall. Why not? And it was sort of the spontaneity of it. If you're controlling it to the point where you can decide when and how and where they get on the field or get on the court, feels a little more contrived, a little more forced, doesn't it? So, yes, you should protect the safety of the opposing players and coaches, but then you just really also don't need to let them on the court or the field to begin with. Credit to Pitt. They've never, in my time covering the team or observing anything, they've never stormed the court. They've never stormed the field, but they really can't storm the field. I don't know. Is there an access point for Pitt fans to get on the field without, like, jumping? I guess in what used to be the open end zone, that wall is pretty low there. You could probably make a quick jump there. But, I mean, it's not easy access to the field at Acrisure Stadium. And it's probably even more difficult to get back out of the field at Acrisure Stadium. The Oakland Zoo, to its immense credit, has never stormed the court, nor should it. I like the idea that you expect to win those games. And, storming the court is sort of this admission of like, holy cow, look what we pulled off. We never should have beat that team. It's like when you chant overrated, when your team is beating a team with a better ranking. Overrated. No, like what you're effectively saying when you chant overrated is, wow, they had you guys wrong. If you're losing to us, you stink, right? Like, it's kind of a cell phone to chant overrated, right? And so, shout out to the Oakland Zoo, credit to the Pitt fans at the Peterson Event Center. They've had plenty of opportunities, plenty of games that would have, in a lot of other campuses, merited a court storming. They've never done it. And so, shout out to them. A lot of, much credit for that. So this rule change doesn't really affect much for Pitt because they don't do that. But other schools, you'll have to decide how you're going to handle those court stormers or field stormers. The other development was injury reports. What a joke. I mean, like, give me a break. They basically say there's no enforcement for this at all. They want to have ACC schools provide injury reports ahead of conference games, and you're going to have to list them as either available, probable, questionable, or out. And you don't have to designate what the injury is, and you have to release one on, like, for football games, like one on Thursday and then another one on Saturday, and you can change to a game time decision, and basketball is like the day before and then one the day of, and like for what? Like, you have no enforcement of it. They've specifically said, like, they said any school is shown to not be operating, taking this seriously, basically, they could be subject to penalties. Like, what penalties are you going to, like, you're going to have to do a whole lot of paperwork to prove that somebody was healthier than the injury report claimed they were in order to do what? Fine them $20,000? What are you talking about? What's the point here? Every one of these coaches is going to be as conservative as they can, or maybe as liberal as they can, I mean, depending on how you want to go about it, and list lots of guys as probable, lots of guys as available, lots of guys. Yeah, like, you're going to trust Bill Belichick to, like, be accurate in this thing in any kind of way that's usable? And the reasoning, is not to create a competitive balance or something like that. The reasoning, which I actually applaud, their heads are in the right place on this, is what they said is to protect student athletes, coaches, and other administrators and people around the programs from getting, contacted, enticed, intimidated by gamblers and people associated with sports betting. And I appreciate that. I actually think, like, look, if creating a little bit of transparency with injuries or availability, not with injuries, but with availability, of creating a little bit of transparency with availability insulates the players and the coaches and the staffers from that element, even just a little bit, good. I think that's admirable. I still maintain that the number of times where a team's expectation of an opponent's availability affected their game plan to the extent that it impacted the outcome of the game, like, minimal times. I mean, like, I guess I'd have to ask coaches, hey, how many times do you feel like you've won a game or lost a game because of these circumstances? Because you thought the other team had a guy who was out and he played, or you thought the other team had a guy who was in and he didn't play? How many times do you think I would ask Pat Narduzzi, in your coaching career, you've been coaching for 40 years or whatever it is, how many times do you feel like you benefited from the other team thinking you had a guy who was going to be out and he ended up playing, or vice versa? The other team thought you had a guy who was going to play and he ended up being out. How many times did you actually benefit from that? Like, I mean, I think this is an instance, and no sports do this other than baseball. Baseball doesn't care. And I love baseball for it. Like, they don't play around. They don't play these games. The most game that baseball plays is that they'll sort of, I don't want to say invent an injury, but they'll just, this guy's having a hard time. Looks like he's got an elbow problem. Send him down, like, but all these other sports, everybody plays these games. Oh, we're going to get the strategic advantage. Like, what are you talking about? Like, sometimes I think these guys overthink things a little bit, but that's besides the point. ACC is going to do this. They'll get, pardon my language, they'll get half-ass participation, and it'll be partially accurate, perhaps mostly inaccurate, and there'll be no enforcement, and it'll be kind of a joke. So that's that. Otherwise, like, all the conference media days are happening right now. The SEC was last week. The Big Ten was this week. I think the Big 12 is this week, or was last week. Like, they're all going on. All of these conference commissioners, Sankey and Yormark and Petiti and Phillips, they're all talking, and they're all saying things. And a big popular topic of conversation has been the college football playoff and potential expansion. And the Big Ten keeps talking about this 4 automatic qualifiers. 4 automatic qualifiers from the Big Ten. 4 automatic qualifiers from the SEC. 2 from the ACC. 2 from the Big 12. And 1 from the Group of 5. Which is basically like 2 giant middle fingers. You know, the Big Ten, when they had 11, used to have like 2, like the 2 ones of the 11 would be in the logo. Sort of like negative space type of thing. You could see the ones. Like, picture that logo, but with middle fingers instead. That's what the Big Ten is doing with this proposal. And those middle fingers are aimed solely, exclusively at the ACC and the Big 12, with a bit of a nod to the group of 5 programs. And there's just no regard for the rest of the sport. There's no regard for it whatsoever. Now, how does this impact Pitt? Well, it's not something Pitt can affect. It's not something Pitt can do anything about. It's not something Pitt can really react to in any kind of way. It's happening at the conference level, the conference leadership level, and it's not like Pat Narduzzi's got anything he can do about it. But what will be interesting to see as we move forward in the different college football playoff formats that are being considered and talked about and selection processes and all these things, what'll be interesting to see is how schools like Pitt adjust their non-conference scheduling. Because if it really comes down to you having two automatic qualifiers out of the ACC, or even, I think the ACC and the Big 12 favor the 5+11 program plan, going up to 16 teams in the playoffs with the five automatic qualifiers being the 4 conference champions out of the 4 power conferences, and then the highest ranked group of 5 program, and then the other 11 spots getting filled by the next highest 11 highest rated teams. And you might end up with 4 teams from the Big Ten and 4 from the SEC, or maybe you'll end up with 2. Maybe it's a really weird year. You'll only end up with 1, something like that. But either of those, if you end up with these automatic qualifiers, whether you have 1 or 2, there's a real question of what Pitt should do in the non-conference and how Pitt should schedule. Because ultimately, it's probably unlikely that Pitt is getting itself into a position to either be one of 2 automatic qualifiers under the Big Ten's plan or one of 11 at-large selections under the ACC's plan, unless it wins the ACC. It seems hard to imagine Pitt being ranked in the top 11 and not winning the conference championship. And so if it's really Pitt's playoff chances almost exclusively come down to winning the ACC title, does it matter what you do in the non-conference? And what I mean is, for the longest time, I've been a big advocate of just stacking wins. Like, just schedule as many wins as you can. You know what I mean? Like, there's no point in scheduling like they did in 2018, where they had Penn State, UCF, and Notre Dame on the schedule. And there were different factors that affected that. They don't control when the Notre Dame games are scheduled, and you weren't going to turn down Penn State, and UCF, when they scheduled it, wasn't expected to be as good as they ended up being that year. But you don't need a season like that. You don't even need a year like last year where they had West Virginia and Cincinnati, or a year like this with West Virginia and Notre Dame. Like, you don't need to do that. Stack wins. Get to 9 or 10 wins as often as you can, and that's going to ultimately help the program and lift the program, because you'll be ranked and you'll be winning lots of games. And if they're all against Kent State and Akron and Duquesne, so be it. You're stacking wins, But the complicating factor now is that the ACC is going to pay out TV revenue based on your ratings, like proportionally. Not everybody's going to get the same amount of money. And now it should be, in theory, advantageous to schedule good opponents. Schedule good games that are going to draw eyeballs. Pitt, Central Michigan, not going to get a lot of people to watch. Pitt, Tennessee, probably had really good viewership back in 2022 and 2021. So what is in Pitt's best interest? Is it to schedule the win, the game that most likely should be a win, or schedule the game that could be a win? I mean, they split that 2-game series with Tennessee, but it'll be a more difficult win, but we'll get more eyeballs, which should bring in more money. Money being the name of the game. And considering that everybody makes every decision based on money, maybe that's the way to go. Now, if the Big Ten has talked about taking its ball and going home, not playing good non-conference schedules if they don't get their 4 automatic qualifiers, because again, they want to ruin the sport. They want to crush the ACC and the Big 12. They want to but they probably ultimately like to crush the SEC as well. But they're willing to live with them and just split all the money between those two conferences. And so they have threatened, well, we're not going to be able to, if we don't have 4 automatic qualifiers, we're just not going to be able to play another Power 4 non-conference opponent, which half of that league doesn't even do it anyway. So, like, are you going to tell Penn State and Indiana, don't play tough non-conference schedules anymore? They'll all be like, okay, we won't. I mean, so the Big Ten doesn't even do it, right? And they're threatening not to do it at all. Where does that leave, like, Pitt? You probably need to schedule as many good games, interesting games as you can to drive money. And maybe there's an outcome where the Big 12 follows the ACC's lead, goes into sort of dividing the TV revenue by, according to ratings, and then it behooves Pitt and West Virginia to continue that series because that's probably the game that's going to get the most eyeballs on an annual basis outside of conference games, or a Notre Dame game or something. And that'd be great if we get the backyard brawl every year, right? So for the longest time, I was all about like stacking wins. I thought just schedule the cupcakes, 1 Power 4 conference team, 2 Group of 5 teams, and 1 FCS team every year. And ideally, that Power 4 non-conference team would be Penn State, West Virginia, or Notre Dame. One of them, never more than one of them. And if you can't, try to get somebody who is interesting. Don't get Oklahoma State or Iowa. That wasn't that interesting. Go get Tennessee. That was interesting. Which actually, in this new setup, where you're going to get more money based on how many eyeballs watch your games, get Tennessee. Get schools that, like, not just are Pitt fans going to be more interested in watching, but those schools are going to bring huge ratings on their own. It's funny, some of the most viewed videos I've done, these Morning Pitt videos, like, since we started doing them 3 years ago or whatever it was, or 4 years ago or something, the highest viewed videos of Morning Pitts, not like the post-game shows, but the Morning Pitts, were all in the week leading up to that 2022 Tennessee game. And I remember, like, the numbers were off the charts. I'm like, wow, people are really excited about the backyard brawl, and Pitt fans are really excited. No, it was Tennessee fans, because Tennessee fans will watch anything they can find that has to do with Tennessee football. So schedule opponents like that. Schedule opponents who their fans are going to watch everything they possibly can. I mean, it's good for my YouTube numbers, but also it's going to be good for your TV ratings. And then if it doesn't matter what you do in the non-conference, if the non-conference truly is irrelevant to your chances of getting in, if you're a school like Pitt and you pretty much have to rely on the automatic qualifier, schedule whatever you want to schedule. And even if you're getting your brains beat in, or if you're going 2-2 in the non-conference or 1-3, which, I mean, honestly, if they went to the 2 automatic qualifiers, they should just switch to the ACC should go to 9 conference games and just take that out altogether, and just go the route that the SEC has gone. You just have your focus entirely on your top 2 teams, your 2 automatic qualifiers. But if you're Pitt, you don't gain all that much from whether you win or lose in the non-conference. So you might as well try to get TV dollars by scheduling better opponents. So I don't know. I might be leaning that way now. I still think you should stack wins. I still think it'd be better if you're like, getting 9 wins with a game or 2 left to play in November or something like that. You pile up the wins. I mean, like, they would have been in position for something like that last year, where they go undefeated in September, they win the non-conference, and then they, if you go undefeated in the non-conference, you just win a couple of games, and all of a sudden you're at 7-8 wins with 3 or 4 games left to play. So you got a real chance to get into double-digit victories every year if you take the stack wins approach. But I go back and forth on it. I don't know how they should schedule. Probably schedule with an eye toward getting into the playoffs, do whatever you need to do to make the playoffs, and do whatever you need to do to make the most money. Oh, and in the end, the Big Ten will dictate that you end up with games on ESPNU, so you won't get any TV ratings at all. Hooray! All right. Tomorrow we'll talk about what Pat Narduzzi says today. He's going to meet the media days in Charlotte today. We'll talk about that tomorrow. And then, of course, we'll have the mailbag on Friday, so get your questions in right now on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. Don't forget, we have the live show tonight at 8:30 p.m. here on YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And yeah, we'll keep an eye on Charlotte and see what comes out down there. Thanks so much for tuning in today. Like this video and subscribe to YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We'll catch up with you tonight for the live show, tomorrow for the Morning Pit, right here, YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com.